Welcome. We'll just get in this podcast.
Yeah,
Let's
keep
just
it
do this.
going,
Let's roll with
man.
this.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. I believe we're tracking over there. We're good, right? Audio's good. Everything's good. Um, yeah, but before we get into the episode today, Dave and I were just talking and talking about film stuff. But my point was being on set recently, the idea of what is a professional,
Yeah.
and both in the music world, in the film world, I think in any world, I kind of take it as, so me as a professional singer, what does that mean? What's the difference between me and anybody else who thinks they can sing or wants to sing?
Yeah.
I would say the difference is if you hire me to sing in a professional setting, not that I won't make a mistake, but I can almost guarantee you that I will hit the song and the note and the lyric that I'm supposed to hit when I'm supposed to hit it. I've made mistakes, obviously. You've been witness to such things.
Likewise.
But especially if it's like a national anthem kind of moment, or like in a wedding, or
Funeral.
you have me singing your opening song at your wedding. I can guarantee you I am not gonna miss that opening song. And that's what you're paying for, is that Dante's got that opening song locked down. There will not be an issue.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about it because he's the professional and he's taking care of it.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of an experience I had on set where um, very talented people, very good equipment. The moment is now, equipment doesn't work correctly and somebody on set doesn't know how to fix the problem. That's that moment to me where it's like, you're not a professional.
Totally.
Like, you're paying for that moment. I got a 10-minute window to shoot. And if you're, as harsh as that might seem, like, well, can you help that the equipment malfunctioned? No, but you could have a backup ready.
Yeah.
You could know, I guess for me in that moment, that's what I would say, is that if you hire me to shoot in a 10-minute window, I can guarantee you my equipment's going to work and I'm going to have you're going to get your shot. And if you're not getting your shot, I wouldn't consider myself a professional. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree on a lot of positions. Like a lot of what I did at the radio station was
Mhm.
managing equipment, right? And we would do live remote breaks. And yeah, it got to be a real point of pride for me to go, we will be on the air. You know, like the generator's not going to run out of gas. The battery and the microphone's not going to go bad. How do I know that? Because I have tons of extra gasoline. I have tons of extra batteries. I have a backup for the microphone. Like you said, will the signal from the antenna be as clear as day? Well, some things are a little bit out of my control, but to the extent that I can keep variables under my control,
Mhm.
then yeah, no, we will be there. There are going to be extra jumper cables.
I think it's okay to not be there yet. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I've worked with lots of creatives that are on a path towards considering themselves a professional,
Mhm.
whether it's graphic design stuff, web design stuff, video production, all of that. Everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah.
I just think that when you're on that, like, how do you know when you've crossed over to I am a professional?
Mhm.
My point would be that is, you'll know it because you'll have a sense of confidence in what you can deliver, and you'll know, yes, obviously lightning could strike and everything could,
Yeah.
it could be something completely unforeseen. But as far as on your end, is there anything that's evading your performance that you kind of, that moment where you like, I got to Google this, I got to go figure out, exactly what it is? No, like you don't have that. And if you are Googling stuff, you're just not a professional yet. You're still
Yeah.
learning. You're still on that path.
Yeah, it all
Keep
comes
going.
from preparation, and that's something I get from like some of my favorite musicians I listen to interviews on. Or when you talk about when you have me, if you hire me for singing at your wedding, or if you hire me for this performance or that, I think as a bass player, I'm going, you know, if we're going to play for 3 hours, I promise it won't be a dumpster fire. Even if I've never heard the song, like the
Mhm.
the bones I'm going to drop, the missed notes are going to be in the key that we're playing in, and I can walk to get somewhere. to
Mhm.
make it sound right, you know. Um, so yeah, I think you're right. Being a professional is
Do you remember
even
like that transition though? Because there is like a financial, I remember doing open mics for
Mhm.
years. I remember like putting in your time
Yeah, yeah,
and people start to pay you as a professional and how you like work that up, to where you get to where when you are operating as a professional, you kind of have a standard of, well, this is what I charge for this thing, this service, or
hmm
this, whatever it is I'm doing. It is, like you don't go from nothing to 2 grand a night. You know what I mean?
yeah. I still haven't done that
Yeah. Well, oh damn, I didn't mean to let that.
yet.
I wasn't supposed to say anything. No, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there's a bit of a journey there, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't. I mean, obviously, the joke is like when you're quoting a project. Well, what's your quote? It's like, well, how much do you have?
yeah.
It's
Right.
like,
How much you got?
but you have to gauge where you're at, and I think
Yeah.
to just be ready to. I still stand by when we went out to Nashville and Ed Cash did my first
hmm
big record, whatever. Um, he gave me a guarantee. I don't know if you remember. Were you there? I don't know if you were there in that conversation or
I
not,
don't
but
think so.
guy has lots of Grammys, and he was basically, I'm paying him independently to produce my record, but he's like, I guarantee, I stand by everything that I do, is what he said. I have eyes and ears on everything, and at the end of the day, if you're not happy with a track that I produce for you, you don't owe me a dime. And I really like looking around his huge house and at his Grammy, you know what I mean? Is that moment where it's like, oh, well, that's how you get to this level is you have, like I said, he had a level of confidence where
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
like, I know you're a good enough songwriter. I know your material. I know I'm a good enough producer that I can give you songs that are going to really impress you.
yeah.
And he stood behind that. And I mean, yeah, every track he played for me, I was like, great. I got no,
hmm
like
Yeah,
it was as good as he said it was going to be. But I also felt like that was a cool moment where I thought, yeah, we should, in this industry at least, like you got to stand behind your work like that. You have to say, and I've done that too with video work, like Nick and I have said with clients. I mean, I do stand behind it. If I have obviously, you might get some crazy, unreasonable person that's like, nitpicking something
yeah.
stupid and you're not going to give them a full refund. But honestly, if anybody had a legitimate complaint where I dropped the ball, I would be perfectly fine saying, take your deposit, no hard feelings.
Right. Yeah,
I screwed it up. My bad.
yeah. I agree with all that. If you are at a level where you can guarantee your work, you don't have a nice house with nice things in it by giving away a lot of money back to people that are taking
Yeah.
you up on that
Yeah. I
guarantee.
think
So,
so. I think so. I think
yeah,
that, but you also, that's how you, I think, get to that position. It's all about reputation, and you don't, you're not going to be getting hit up by major record labels to produce records if they think for a minute you might not actually deliver on, what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah,
They're hitting you up for a reason. It's because they know you're that kind of guy who's going
yeah.
to deliver
hmm
a Grammy winning record.
Yeah.
So
Part of that is not being petty. I just read a quote about that this week.
not being
Just,
petty or not being Tom
oh
Petty.
no, you want to be
You want to be
Tom
Tom
Petty.
Petty.
I mean, petty as in the adjective. Um, like when you talk about, let's say you had a client that was being ridiculous and wanted their deposit back, and you're thinking to yourself, like, maybe that's on me, maybe it's not. I guess the point I'm making is the concept there is your reputation is built on an overall scope of work.
hmm
And if you get into the weeds on, you know, on a guarantee on a job that is debatable,
hmm
like what a professional would do is kind of go, look, I delivered what I said I was going to, but if if this is going to spoil the relationship,
Yeah. That's probably
fine,
what I would do.
yeah, I'll make it right as best I can and keep moving forward. Um, yeah, the shop I work at, same thing. You know, if if it gets to be a recurring issue with that client, then you just know it's not a
Well,
productive
and
relationship.
I've had clients like that, there are clients that you fire
Yeah, yeah,
just because they're not worth the
right.
the headache. And I still think even in that case, we left those situations as gracious
Yeah,
as you
yeah.
can.
hmm
And it's not like you say to the client's face,
Right.
"You're fired." You just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, this isn't working out. No hard
Yeah.
feelings. We
Yeah.
got, let's just part ways." Um, yeah, I haven't had a lot of those, but I've had a couple that it's just not, you know.
That reminds me of a dad hack I thought of this week,
Oh yeah, let's
which
hear it.
is
Dad
so
hack.
so the pastor at church last week was making the point that all men are like still just pretty much 10-year-old boys. And he was kind of making the point
All?
of he said all,
Well,
like
let me hear this. Sounds kind of Protestant.
yeah, and well, funny thing is, so yeah, you're exactly where I was when I heard him say that. I was kind of like, I'm not. I'm way more evolved than that. And he was making a joke because he's talking about the dynamic of a marriage, and he's specifically citing the verse that says something like, "Wives, respect your husbands; husbands, love your wives."
Mhm.
And the concept is, wives, we're all 10-year-old boys at heart, and just tell us our muscles are big, and that'll go a long ways. And likewise, husbands, say nice things to your wives. Compliment them on their earrings and that sort of thing. Just like my daughter's 6, but by the time she's 10, you know, just saying your dress is pretty, that goes
Goes
a
a long
long way.
way. Yeah.
So he makes this point, and I'm sitting there like, that's so ridiculous. I'm not a 10-year-old boy. I'm a man. Fast forward like 3 hours, we're at our friend's, and I'm throwing the football around in the backyard with my boy and his buddy, and I made like a fairly athletic catch, like on the run. And I looked right at my wife, like a patio, to see if she saw it.
And she didn't care.
She didn't. Well, yeah, but I was like, oh gosh, yeah, I'm just seeking that validation, just like he said,
Yeah.
And I guess I say all that to say, when you fire a customer, you don't say you're a stupid customer, you're fired.
I guess it depends on the situation too. There
Yeah,
might be a situation
there
where
are
it's
times,
warranted.
but the dad hack I thought of when I realized like I'm a 10-year-old boy, just like the pastor says, all of us are 10-year-old boys. Then I thought, well, and girls are 10-year-old girls, women are 10-year-old girls. They respond no matter the age of the
Mm.
woman when she walks through the door of your shop. If you say something not creepy, but pay them a compliment, they're not going to be upset with you. They're going to respond well. And I thought, so what if you use your dad skills that you would use on your 10-year-old boy, like, positive reinforcement, dangle
Mhm.
the carrot rather than the stick. My wife says, water the flowers,
Mhm.
don't spray water on the seed or the weeds. And I was like, what if you try that on adults? Like use your dad skills to jujitsu mentally on
Yeah.
adults. And I did it this week, like in my emails to some of our problem customers. I was giving them like big compliments on the stuff that I wanted to see more of. And now I'm starting to see more of the behavior I want out of them. And I'm like, this is hilarious. I'm parenting
That
grown-ups.
makes me think of I did a video production with a guy this week who he's a very big sales guy, and his big thing he kept pushing, which I forget who he said it. It's not, he didn't claim that it was him, but he was saying no one cares what you think until they think that you care. And that
Yeah.
was his big thing.
Yeah.
He's like, you can't go into a situation assuming that people are going to care what you think. He's
Uh-huh.
like, you have to go in assuming they don't care what I think. And so your strategy is to make them think that you care.
I like that. Yeah.
And a big part of that is compliments, and is
Sure.
coming in and saying, you walk into somebody's house that you don't know, and you see. I think he's talking about, if you see their family pictures, like who are these beautiful people, or whatever,
Uh-huh.
showing that interest, complimenting their family. People love that, just like the 10-year-old boy, but I would say it goes beyond the 10-year-old boy. It's everybody. Like
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
important. I think it is important, not in a manipulative way, but it is important to compliment people and to remind people. Like, and this guy wasn't doing it in a weird salesy way. He was doing it in a real like, he's a devout Christian, and he's like, no, I actually do think that
Yeah.
people are amazing, and their lives are amazing, and their families are amazing, and reminding people of that is important towards establishing a relationship with that person. And until you have that relationship, then why would they care what you think? And
Yeah.
why try to tell them how to do things or what to think, or why they should do anything. They're not going to care.
I'm with you that it's not to be manipulative. It's not so that you can
It
take
could
from
be
them.
manipulative,
Yeah.
but you could also do it in a non-manipulative, just a decent human being way.
Yes. Our great mistake is to try to exact from each person virtues which he does not possess, and to neglect the cultivation of those which he has.
Who's that?
Somebody smart.
Some
But
guy.
I wrote it down because I thought it was smart, and I just think that's what you do as a dad.
Yeah.
You look for, that's what I'm trying to get better at as a dad. Look for virtues in my kids that I want more of, and like highlight those. And I think same goes with clients or prospective clients. You go, yeah, like if you're talking about prospective client, you say, boy, I can tell you have a real eye for value and quality.
Mm-hmm.
That must be important to you. And then,
Buy this product.
yeah, speaking of quality, I make a really good one. Yeah.
Well, we've already a little sidetracked. I think too, there is feedback we've gotten that like, oh, we need to be more on topic. We do probably, but at the end of the day, the reason that we're doing this, both I think me and I think you, is like, look, I'm going to be dead one day and I want my kids and grandkids to know what I thought about things. And so I really don't want a whole lot of like pressure to say, oh, I need to talk about this specific conspiracy or something like that. It's a combination of conspiracy dad ideas and also just dads and just like, this is what I think. And if people resonate with that, great. If they don't, I don't really care. I mean, I don't know. I know it's a terrible business model, but this is not a moneymaker for us.
So
This
far,
is
this is less of a business
this
and
is
more
just-
of a pursuit. Yeah.
Exactly. So before we get into that, we were going to continue talking about the Laurel Canyon.
Mhm.
I thought it was a perfect opportunity to talk about what has been happening on the lunar surface this week. And you sent me a link to the Intuitive Machines lander that yesterday landed on the moon. And I actually listened to quite a bit of that, and I could not help that it seemed so, well, first of all, I don't know if you knew that it actually landed incorrectly. Have you followed up on it?
I watched.
It fell over. Did you see
that? So the last I saw, and I was hoping maybe you looked at what happened today. So today being February 23rd, when we're recording this, the moon lander landed yesterday. I watched around 6:30 Central Time is when it touched down, as far as I know. Of course,
allegedly.
Yeah. So, man,
I think it did touch down.
Well,
my point is, okay, guys, we were playing golf on the moon.
Yeah.
We were driving around in a golf cart on the moon. We were doing backflips on the moon.
Yeah.
We were like this, that's what I mean by like it landed and it fell over. And we're using all of the technology we have now in 2024.
Yeah.
And it seems like we can barely get a remote lunar module just to land on the moon and take some effing pictures of things.
Yeah.
They couldn't even do that. It fell over. Okay. Yeah. And the whole time it's like, I want to be like, pause, NASA. We were playing golf on the moon. What happened?
Yeah.
Why do we need to send up a lunar lander? Why is a guy not up there? Why isn't a person on the moon right now playing with moon rocks, showing us how easy it is to go on the moon when they made such a big deal about like 52 years and no one's been on the moon, blah, blah, blah. And now we're barely able to get a lander onto the moon.
It was a pretty lackluster finale.
I was expecting to see something. I didn't see anything.
The part I watched, so somewhere around 3:30 was supposed to be the initial touchdown. I log in, catch the stream. It says it's been pushed back to 4:30. Okay. I get on at 4:30 and they've got these broadcasters who are not broadcasters. They're just NASA dorks that are doing their best, God bless them, to try and stall because now things are running behind and they're going, well, it's looking more like 5:30. I jump on at 5:30. Well, okay, it's running behind still. No, 5:30 I think is when they were getting close. And they're just like,
this is all day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
late.
yeah.
I didn't watch up
Because you
until
texted it to me about
yeah,
4:30 or
yeah.
so.
So 4:30 is when it started looking like they were kind of getting close. 5:30 is when I get on the stream and they're like, we're almost there, but they're having trouble with communication from the moon lander.
Yeah.
And so the guys are going, standing by. We're waiting for some communication, and the live feed that you could watch on YouTube at the time is just 3 shots of 3 separate rooms of
Yeah.
scientists
No
just
moon.
tapping on a
No
computer.
moon surface.
And then finally, whoever's in charge of the operation, it's just an audio feed of him going, well, we're regaining the connection with the communication, but it is confirmed we are on the moon. And I thought, they faked it better last time.
Yeah.
And if you were going to do that, why didn't you just say you landed on the moon 3 hours ago?
That's all I kept thinking was all they're doing is showing how stupid it was to believe that they were on the moon 52 years ago. When if you even just think for a second about the difference in technology we're working with now
Yeah.
versus back then, and the idea that
We're
they
streaming it
that
on the
they were
internet.
they were broadcasting live from the surface of the moon, that makes no sense whatsoever. The fact that you like today, our most high-tech thing we could land there can't even
Fell
land
over.
it, fell over. They can't even keep contact with it. Why? What on earth has changed?
Yeah.
And then why couldn't you just send up a dude with a walkie-talkie? You know, like
Sure,
what
yeah.
like why did we have to? I mean, they keep saying it's so expensive, but it doesn't make any sense. Like you're already putting the SpaceX rocket into orbit,
Mhm.
so we can see how much harder they've got. Like 16 payloads on that little lunar thing. You couldn't just put a guy on there. Like why? Like
It's too
how much
weight.
heavier is a dude? Get a small guy, stick him in there, send him to the moon. I think everyone probably knows how we feel about it, but I just think it's stupid. I don't
Yeah,
think
it
they did.
is. Your last episode, you said, when somebody says that they believe we landed on the moon, it's silly to believe that conspiracy theory that we faked it. And you ask if they've read McGowan's book, and if they say no, you just go, "Well, I don't
I don't
you
think they
just
know what
don't
they're
know what you're
talking
talking
about.
about." Yeah. All of a sudden, after yesterday, I go, like you're saying, okay, I'm the crazy one that I think that
I,
this is
I could not
nonsense.
believe when it fell over.
I didn't know it
Yesterday
fell
when I
over.
was looking for an update and they said, "Oh yeah, it did plopped over," and they were like, we were reading all all the sensors. They thought it was supposed to be vertical, and then they're like, "Oh, it's on the y-axis because it fell over."
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I just thought they can't even land. They can't even land like a super high tech thing on the moon without it falling over. That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
No, it
doesn't wash.
They sure were patting themselves on the back yesterday too. They were really proud that somebody
Yes.
said on a microphone that we did it.
But didn't you want to just yell at them like, "We've already done this. We played golf on the moon, guys."
Yeah.
You think you're some big you landed a lunar,
I don't know
or
that
we
you
didn't
did.
ever
Yeah.
play golf on the moon? like we were there with a lot of guys back and forth apparently, but I don't know. It's just getting there is a big deal, I guess.
Is with that with the accusation that we staged it here on Earth
Mhm.
back, 50 some odd years ago. Is there some kind of insight into where we shot the land moon?
Yes.
Okay, was it at Lookout
Lookout
'Cause
Mountain
that
Laboratories.
Seems like
No,
that would be
that's the
best place to
element that
do
we
it.
missed. Okay, so let's cut to we're back to talking about Laurel Canyon, and there was
Yeah.
another element of the Laurel Canyon scene that is really interesting that I completely forgot to talk about, and that was Lookout Mountain Laboratories.
I've got a kind of a synopsis
Okay,
that I took down.
based in Laurel Canyon. This was uh, give the background, but it's a laboratory
Yeah.
owned by the federal government, operated for a long time, no longer now owned by Jared Leto
Oh, I didn't know
to
that.
do God knows what. Yeah, like he bought it for like $5 million or something like 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. Nice.
Which I'm sure it's a awesome hangout now. But
yeah.
anyway, but yeah, it was What year did it start? What was their
Built
capability?
built in 1941. By 1947, it was the world's only completely self-contained movie studio with 100,000 square feet of floor space. The covert studio included sound stages, screening rooms, film processing labs, editing facilities, an animation department.
It didn't have a helicopter landing pad too?
It doesn't. Oh, yeah, here it
did,
is. A
yeah.
helicopter pad and a bomb shelter. Over its lifetime, the studio produced some 19,000 classified motion pictures. My addendum would read, such as the Moon Man.
That's
Moon
just such a
landing.
Stanley Kubrick's
Yes.
moon landing.
Such technological advances as 3D effects were apparently first developed at the Laurel Canyon site. The following Hollywood celebrities had clearance to the facility, but none ever spoke on record of their work at the studio. So Ronald Reagan, you ever heard of him?
Yeah, heard
Walt
of
Disney,
John Wayne.
John Wayne, Marilyn Monroe. I don't know if she's got any ties to the government. Let's see. Accounts vary as to when the facility ceased operations. Some say it was in 1969. Others say it remained open longer. But it was only brought public in the early 90s that this happened. So it reminds me of kind of the comments you hear about MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Where they get caught and they go, yeah, well, we're not doing that anymore, though.
Yeah. It was also, I think they did say like a lot of the nuclear tests, that the reason they had it originally was to process the films for the nuclear bomb test films.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense because all you need is a dark room to do that. You don't necessarily need a full-blown, except federal government spending. Maybe they just said, well, we need to process some film. Let's open a studio,
the biggest, baddest studio ever. Yeah.
But that actually could go back to our Nukes Are Fake podcast. And you say like, well, obviously we realize now a lot of those films of the nuclear test were actually fake. So they were just processing nuclear film tests. They were also faking nuclear film tests.
Processing and manufacturing nuclear film tests. Yeah. The more we do this, the more I find out, the less crazy these sound. Of course, the more crazy I sound to people that I try and tell them. You guys know about this place? It was
when you ask people, no one knows about it, right? Like it's one of those things you say, Lookout Mountain Laboratories.
I just love this list of people that were involved. Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Marilyn Monroe. You know, the girl that was hanging out with the president that got assassinated.
Yeah. That also dated his brother who got assassinated.
Yeah. Does anybody think that's weird? Yeah.
John Wayne.
Who
was caught on camera with Lee Harvey Oswald in the background.
Yeah.
That's not weird. Probably somewhere near Lookout Mountain.
There are a couple of chapters in this book that I thought that's a separate episode all by itself. Like Harry Houdini is one.
Yeah.
Graham Parsons is pretty interesting by himself. But shoot. Anyway, using actors goes way back further than the 60s.
Well, the Lincolns.
That's the one I was trying to cite. Yeah, exactly.
John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah.
That is, well, we'll do that on another podcast, but Dave McGowan also did a long series called How Everything You Know About the Lincoln Assassination is Wrong. And I'm halfway through reading that right now. And it is, one of the points he makes, I'll just do as one tidbit, is that it's not entirely correct, but he just makes the point that like Lincoln is written about as like the greatest president of the United States in American history. And he points out like, well, he couldn't be because he was actually never president of the United States of America.
Oh, that's
he
funny.
was not the 16th president of the United States of America. He was president of the northern states, and Jefferson Davis was president of the Confederate States.
Okay.
So the United States of America at that time didn't exist.
Yeah.
And you kind of think about it and you go, because then his point was like, well, what was Jefferson Davis then? You know, like what was going on? It's like, well, it wasn't the United States that we have today. It was the northern states and the Confederate States. I don't know how long it operated that way, but you know, the idea that he was beloved by all Americans or even voted into office by all Americans, that's just not true.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets skipped over in grade school.
Well, he was the greatest American president that ever existed until Kennedy came along,
Yeah,
you know, because he was killed.
totally.
But we don't need to get into that. But you're right. There's this long, well, it's like in Zoolander. That's fun. Why it's funny that they talk about it. But this long history of using actors.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild if you think about that film,
Yeah, I
Zoolander,
forgot all
and how
about
they
it till you
joke
just
about
mentioned it.
that.
Yeah.
And then if you actually
It's
think about it,
preposterous until it's not. Yeah.
and then it's like, well, actually, they've got a long history of using actors to influence politics.
Uh, Speaking of actors, the Young Turks, I never could find. I mean, I didn't look long and hard at it, but I couldn't find why this group of actors was called the Young Turks. I kept finding references to Young Turks as like actual political activists in
I
different
don't
parts
know
of the
where that
world.
name comes from.
So if anybody knows that, help me out.
Aren't the Young Turks? Isn't that though a reference to the Ottoman Empire though?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in
Before
it,
Hollywood.
right, exactly. But this
And
group
then
of
now it just
actors.
refers to that Cenk Unger guy who's really obnoxious leftist on YouTube.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I don't even know who that guy is.
There's a YouTube presence of crazy communist leftists that are called the Young Turks
Okay.
now.
Well, I
But,
wish they wouldn't put so many on Google because it's making it hard for me to find when I'm looking up Peter
but you're
Fonda.
talking about like Peter Fonda and uh,
Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, Warren Beatty, Roman Polanski.
guy, I miss Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, he was fun. Yeah. Um, I couldn't. I was glancing through the book today. I couldn't find his background because I thought
Which
that would
one?
be Dennis Hopper. I was, they so many times in the book, McGowan covers people's ties to
Mm-hmm.
military intelligence and things like that. Hopper was in and around a lot of weird things in Laurel Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that comes to mind for me, like off the top of my head, is I think he wrote. Did he write, produce, and direct uh, "Rebel Without a Cause"? Or how
No,
was he in? I mean,
I don't think he did. It was the other. It was Easy
he did
Rider.
Easy Rider.
Yeah.
Um, the point is, there's the "Rebel Without a Cause" curse,
Uh huh.
and you know there are four actors that all died within less than 10 years of making the movie. All died in the Laurel Canyon area.
James
Um,
Dean being probably
right.
most famous.
Yeah, yeah,
He died
James.
in Laurel Canyon.
I bet I can find it real quick because, yeah, of the four actors stricken with what has been dubbed the Rebel Without a Cause curse, two were former residents of Laurel Canyon and another lived.
Who are the other ones? Like Steve McQueen or something? Or
Let's see. I'll have to look that up real quick because this just is what I jotted down, is that there were four actors,
hmm,
but I bet I can find that real quick because you're right. There's James Dean was the main one.
that's interesting. Well, while you're looking that up, just to button up the weirdness of that Lookout Mountain Laboratories. So, a lot of people have speculated. I mean, just the fact that we were operating that movie studio, massive, massive movie studio for decades, with I guess the only real explanation for having it was to process the films from the nuclear test. Seems like a lot. Um, when you think about the, you know, the influence that we might have on Hollywood, and I mean, I think that could have been a huge part of like a hub for a lot of, whether it was the music industry or the film industry, or it probably was just like their go-to for any kind of propaganda Hollywood connection. Looks like that's where it was all happening.
Yeah, that's one of the comments I jotted down too, was like in conjunction with Vito Pelikas and his freaks, which got to be known as the hippies, going to all these clubs. It's almost like it was a coordinated idea to have these young Turks showing up at the same clubs,
Hmm.
to where all of the national, like the public attention was on Sunset Strip and Laurel Canyon and the Hollywood area, and these actors and these musical celebrities all in this one area.
Do we
And like,
know if that studio actually produced major films that we saw, that like they came directly out of that studio?
I don't know. Yeah. Um, I did find the four names though.
Oh, who were they?
Yeah. James Dean, James Coburn, Natalie Wood, and then there was one more.
They were all in Rebel Without a Cause?
Yeah. I believe so. Yeah. Natalie Wood was the last one to die.
Who directed Rebel Without a Cause?
Let's see. Pretty sure Hopper was the director.
No, I feel like I don't
No?
think that's right.
Okay.
Well, you tell me. You have the
Well,
internet. I don't have the internet.
No, but
I'm gonna Google. I'm gonna Chat GPT this.
that sounds pretty good. This is listening back to our last one where I was saying
Who directed Rebel Without a Cause?
how hard it is to
Nicholas Ray.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who that is, except
I don't
he
either.
directed
Yeah.
Rebel
He's
Without
the
a
director
Cause.
of Rebel Without a Cause. Duh. There are so many tie-ins in and amongst all of these things, and McGowan kind of weaves it like a quilt. I mean, it's Hopper is in and around so many dark stories throughout the 60s with all of these actors that it's hard to get like a narrative into a 30-minute section of a podcast. And again, I mean, we've talked Charlie Manson before, and I know Charlie Manson's kind of like the cliche thing to talk about in the 60s when you get into dark stuff that happened in California with conspiracy theories. But here you've got Charlie Manson, hanging out with these actors like he's
and musicians, and a lot of them
exactly,
not
yeah.
wanting Neil Young being one. I think we talked on the last
we
podcast
misspoke
that
last week. Yeah, we thought he had auditioned for the Byrds, but he auditioned for Neil Young.
and Neil Young was on record. I mean, praising Charlie Manson before he was the murderer. That like he thought he was a genius.
Awesome,
like he should be this next big.
Yeah.
And then it's like, ooh, maybe not.
My favorite actor tidbit out of all that had to do with Charles Manson was Angela Lansbury is the one that introduced Nancy Pittman to Charles Manson, and Nancy Pittman ended up being one of the
really.
I just, I mean, I realize Angela Lansbury had a career before Murder, She Wrote, but in my head, that's who she is. So just like picturing the woman from Murder, She Wrote, like hanging out with dirty hippies that are going to go.
Have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
No.
Oh, really?
I've been meaning to watch it. My wife doesn't fall asleep early enough.
You have got to watch that. So the interesting thing about that, which is, I mean, yeah, it's an unbelievable film. And there's like Leonardo DiCaprio's character keeps coming around to, and obviously they make it Tarantino style, like ridiculously violent and whatever. But there's just this constant like theme where he comes back to, he's like these goddamn hippies. Like he you can tell even Tarantino hates hippies.
Huh.
And like he really captures that vibe of like there were these maybe like more liberal minded even peace loving people at the time, the anti-war people, and they hated these dirty, smelly, rotten hippies who got involved in everything and just made it stupid.
It really muddies the waters effectively. It's crazy that, I mean, like we think of the government as inept and, just full of bureaucracy and ineffective. But I don't know if they're not really dumb, they're really smart.
Well, that would be the point, is that is a strategy that's been employed for a long time. As long as you can kind of, well, it's back to the same idea of that you're a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. You're a nut. You're whatever. As long as it's an easy way to always keep a controlled opposition. And the hippies were nothing but controlled opposition. They literally fabricated from the ground up by the CIA.
Part of it that comes up throughout this book, and I mean, if you let's say you take the book out of your study of the 60s, there's a pretty wild amount of people that are hippies that have these incredibly like dark, violent deaths. And we're not talking about like, I started thinking about, I was looking through the list of Laurel Canyon deaths at the beginning of chapter 3 in that book. And it's just citing one after another. And I thought, well, you could kind of dismiss a lot of these as, well, they did drugs. and when you do drugs, bad things happen to you.
Didn't he give like a number though, where it was like 1 in
Oh yeah, last week
like
we were talking about
500 people? Like if you
yeah,
knew, if the same stats applied to like just general
yeah.
population, you'd be like, people are dying left and
It
right. Oh
was
my gosh.
within the numbers start to the murders kind of creep, or the excuse me, the untimely deaths. They start to creep into the early to mid 70s, but yeah, I mean from 65 to about 75, there is this what looks to me to be a very crazy amount of untimely deaths with weird circumstances around them, um, of all of these people that are tied in with these bands. And when I was looking through it today, like I said, I was thinking like, well, if I were talking to somebody that's a mouth breather about this, and I start listing these off, the surface level of the conversation is, yeah, they're doing a lot of drugs. Bad things happen when you do drugs. You drown. You fall asleep and you
In
overdose.
vomit.
Yeah, so some of that's true, but then
Isn't that in Spinal Tap? What is that joke he has? Worst way of dying, drowning. And no, they're trying to solve. There's somebody.
man, I
They're
know
like,
that's pretty
you
bad.
can't exactly fingerprint vomit. That's what he says. Like that. He's trying to vomit, but not his vomit.
Oh,
Then
God.
can't actually fingerprint vomit, so you don't really know.
Yeah. Um. Anyway, just what crossed my mind as I was reading through them today was like, okay, yeah, fine, but then you have like the Frank Zappas and the David Crosbys, who are kind of the figureheads of this anti-war peace love movement, that are like pretty avid gun
Mhm.
fans, that are huge on security, like live in a compound, have known to be like,
They're cult leaders.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
kind of like, these kind of the dictatorship type personas. Um, and I just thought, like, as I'm reading through again some of these accounts of deaths, I thought these are not just regular, like a drug deal went bad and the person
Mhm.
got shot in the face, but like people being bludgeoned to death and people being stabbed, tens and fifties and hundreds of times. So
It's clearly a hit.
it's,
Yeah.
well, a hit, but also like, uh, I guess it's one of those, like, it's one thing if you just get held up because you have a suitcase full of drugs or money and somebody wants it. I would imagine, I've never done a drug holdup, but seems like you would like
Take the
minimum
money and run.
effective dose.
Yeah.
You would shoot somebody in the head and then you would get out of there. But a lot of the murders that you see here are like somebody
It's like
really
once upon a time in Hollywood. It's like,
just,
which you haven't seen, but at the end,
yeah,
like
yeah,
violent murder that's
yeah.
just like ridiculous, terrible murders.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty crazy, and again, it's the ties that you know Manson gets pawned off as like a crazy person, which he is, but you know, in the general public narrative, it's almost like this guy came out of nowhere. But the more I'm reading
Oh, but
about
if
these
you read
things,
like Tom O'Neill's book, like he didn't come out of nowhere at
exactly,
all.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
he was MK Ultra, 100%.
yeah,
Whether they, who knows if they had him in a program, but lots of stints in jail,
uh-huh,
all kinds of disturbing, you don't even want to know about sexual, psychological
mm-hmm,
manipulation. And, that guy's brain was washed, uh, why is he crazy? Well, I don't know, do that much acid. And, I think he was programmed to be the
yeah,
cult leader that he was.
yeah.
And maybe that just happened in a vacuum, but
The
sure
one thing
looks
I
like
was gonna ask you
not.
about was some of the more like seemingly gifted artists from that time. So like Gene Clark was one I remember them talking about. Um, who was another? Brian Wilson from the Beach
Mhm.
Boys, and then I forget the third
Who
one.
also loved Manson
Yeah,
before he was
totally.
a
Yeah,
murderer. Yeah.
him and the other Beach Boy, Dennis Wilson, spent a lot of time with Manson. But Brian Wilson specifically is one that's got a history of like mental issues and like found just wandering the streets in his underwear, that sort of thing. Um, and so when you like start thinking about MK Ultra type operations, and Manson having been brainwashed possibly, and or like, and then plug a little bit of Zoolander into there, all of a sudden you go like there are these accounts in the book that McGowan is quoting where people would talk about like Gene Clark. Oh, he wrote these amazing songs and he was really gifted. But there were times where he would like on a dime it was almost like he was a different person,
Mm.
you know. And I get that some, especially like eccentric artist type, you know, they're kind of all over the place. They can be moody, which is part of the genius. And the other side of the coin would possibly be like this erratic behavior. Um, but after reading so much of the book, you starts to wonder. I start to wonder, like, well, early in the book, McGowan starts talking about somebody in that Laurel Canyon scene whose dad was a psychologist and spent a lot of time working on government experience in and around, government experience experiments in and around MK Ultra.
Hmm.
Um, and the idea of being like creating an operative that they have two personalities inside of them, you know. So that just got me thinking on these artists that
You're wondering if they might have been in on it or kind of just
in on it, or
useful
if
idiots
they
that they didn't really even understand that they were being manipulated.
not so much wondering if they got manipulated, but more like, did some of these artists, when they had been, you know, they disappear for a few days, and what we think they went on a bender or, you know, whatever, did they get put into a room somewhere, and did they get
Very well could
brainwashed? And
happen. I mean, I think that's the genius of a program like this is that you could always easily blame it on a drug
yeah,
problem. You could easily blame it on a bender or whatever. Um, and in reality, you could have had them in a van out in the middle of nowhere, and you're brainwashing them to think some sort of nonsense.
yeah,
I mean, how deep does it go? That's the problem with having a program like this is that we just have no idea,
yeah,
and the fact that it existed is enough to make you wonder,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, we know in the case of Charles Manson, it ended very badly, you know,
Yeah.
that there might be lots of other, even, people speculate about like Graham Parsons and
Hmm.
even Jimi Hendrix. And there's people that did they just die of a drug overdose, or was there something else going on there? Or, if you have people that I guess that you've encouraged that whole life, it makes it very easy to push somebody over an edge, where maybe you didn't directly
Hmm.
whack them or whatever, but maybe you pushed them in a certain way that
Yeah,
you knew
right.
their mind's not going to be able to take much more of this.
Little bit of column A, little bit of column B. Some of these people possibly knew too much and were
I think it goes back to
drowned.
the managers and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
people. It's the names that you don't know.
right.
It's Jimi Hendrix manager. He was, I think he was MI6. I think he
Uh-huh.
was, but like guys like that, like what are you even doing in the music industry? Like, why are you,
Oh man, yeah,
you
we
know?
don't have time to get into it. And I also only listened to that chapter once, but one of the last chapters in this book starts to get into new wave
Mm.
and like punk and,
Oh,
you
fits
know,
in the
like
tantrums.
no.
He's CIA, right?
You mean like the
The
pretty
the
current
the
band fits in the
current yeah,
No.
his family's all CIA. Yeah.
No, this is talking more about like back when like uh bands like B-52s and
Mm.
Social Distortion and things like that were coming out. But it's funny, McGowan starts talking about this family 100 years ago in England, the Copelands. And
Hmm.
he's talking about this and that Copeland, such and such Copeland, and Miles Copeland. And before, as after a while, I'm kind of like, Copeland, isn't that Stuart Copeland? Isn't he with the police? And sure enough, McGowan
Really?
makes this connection of Stuart Copeland's family and McGowan's, the way he brings it all together. So it's this military intelligence family that did a lot of traveling in and around these different government coups and things like that. And then by the time, oh, I think it's Copeland's brother, maybe Miles Copeland. He goes from like, just like you said about these other managers, this is what brought it to mind. He goes from doing all these like clandestine operations to all of a sudden just becoming a booking agent for bands. And then he puts Stuart Copeland in touch with Gordon. What's Sting's real name? Gordon. uh,
Oh, I can't remember.
anyway, he
He
puts
connects them.
he connects, yeah, and with the guitar player that I now his
That's
name's
so
escaping me,
funny
but
that now you say that. The
Shumway,
one
Gordon Shumway, is it?
the one person, well, actually I know a couple, but like the one person I know who does work a lot of the time in Langley, um, also, when he's not doing that, is producing live music events.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and I've always thought that was a funny combination. I don't know why.
Gordon
but
Sumner,
oh,
Stink's
okay.
real name. Sorry.
But isn't that strange that like yeah, he works for the agency some of the time, and then when
Yeah.
he's not, he specifically works in live music production, live events. And I think I do know from the live events, he just really enjoys that. So I don't think there's any relationship, but it is like maybe it's a weird combination. It sounds kind of like Hendrix manager. Like, why would you be working as a spy of some sort, and then be like, I'm done with that spy stuff. I'm
You know what I really
gonna go
want to do?
manage a rock
Yeah.
star, or I'm gonna go book festivals around the country. I guess
Yeah.
it's just it is a fun job. I mean, working in the festival industry, but.
Yeah. I don't know. But
Do you know any spies that also work in the live music
not
industry,
that I'm
or in
aware
the,
of. Yeah.
festivals or music production? Or I know at least one.
So many of them that I've come across are not real bright. I'd be surprised to find out that they
Yeah.
were spies. Yeah. Which, when you were just talking about that, I thought if I were a spy, I might consider getting into the live music business because I feel like I could game that system pretty well.
I feel like the spy business probably gets old though. It's probably kind of a downer
Oh yeah, I
where
would agree with that. Yeah.
you kind of get to a point where you're like, God, I want to do something else. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to do a music festival. And you go, well, that sounds like fun. Wholesome.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know. Um, yeah, a lot of youth and vigor, but yeah. Um, I could give you some more actor stuff.
Well, I mean, yeah, where do you want to kind of button this up? I mean, button it up, go read
You know,
Laurel Canyon scene
I
on
only
David
want to mention
McGowan's
Phil
website.
Hartman just because.
Oh yeah, what were you going to say about him?
Only because I mean, he's not super tied in to like the Manson family, except for he went to school with Squeaky Froman, which is one of the main
Really
characters when you like watch anything on the Manson family. She's one of the girls that I think she's still in jail, and like you can find even like a 60 Minutes interview from the 90s.
Did you know he was a graphic design artist for a long time?
So I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, he designed first of all, he
for a
designed
bunch of bands. He did a lot of artwork.
The CSN logo. You can Google it. That's one of the more iconic Crosby, Stills and Nash logos. Phil Hartman designed that. He designed album covers for America, for Steely Dan, and for a few other artists that I don't have off the top of my head. Let's see. But yeah, he was also a roadie for Jimi Hendrix.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, it's just, he's one of the coolest characters of the 2000s.
And he wrote Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What a crazy, we should just do a story on the life and times of Phil Hartman.
That's a wild story, actually. I mean,
okay.
Even just his whole life story is nuts.
This I didn't think of his death as a conspiracy necessarily, but McGowan's book says, let's see. He was murdered in his Encino home on May 28th, 1998. The official story holds that it was his wife, Bryn, who shortly thereafter shot herself with a different gun, naturally, and reportedly after she had left the house and then returned with a friend after the LAPD had arrived home. There is a very strong possibility, however, that Phil and his wife were murdered, with the true motive for the crime covered up by trotting out the tired but ever popular murder-suicide scenario. So, yeah, I mean, I had kind of just taken it at face value, but McGowan seems to be of the opinion that there's something sneaky afoot with Phil Hartman's death.
Sorry if there was a blip there, but anyway, so yeah, you were kind of closing out the Laurel Canyon scene.
Yeah,
Phil Hartman.
And then if we're talking Young Turks, I mean, I know we kind of alluded to the Young Turks in the last episode, but then just looking through kind of a brief summary of like Peter Fonda, his father Hank served as a decorated U.S. Naval Intelligence officer during World War II. Bruce Dern's another Young Turk. His godparents were the first lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, was his godmother.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
Yeah.
And he's also featured in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, one of the main characters, which is interesting because he's a holdover from that era.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then literally in a film about that era.
Warren Beatty, his father, Ira Owens Beatty, was a professor of psychology. But as McGowan points out, like oddly enough, he was a professor in a college campus, like right off of Washington D.C. His father moved to Norfolk, Virginia, um, and then later he went to Arlington, which is the home of the Pentagon. I mean, like his dad's this high profile psychologist that is not, documented on government payroll, but
Neither
he,
was Bob Lazar. So.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah. And then another, uh, the Altamont Speedway, that Rolling Stones free concert in
Yeah.
1969, which turned into a real big mess because the Hells Angels were doing security and there were some deaths as a
Yeah.
result of it. One of those deaths was caught on camera. Do you know who the cameraman was?
No.
George Lucas.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
George Lucas, who spent some time working. Let's see. I'm almost certain it says here he spent some time working at that Lookout Laboratory with Steven Spielberg. So the point here is like we're talking the end of the 60s. George Lucas happens to capture the least obstructed camera angle of this particular murder. And, between the Manson murders and then this Altamont Music Festival, that was kind of a couple of like nails in the coffin for this whole free love hippie movement, which ushered in arena rock and then new wave. And then you've got Lucas and Spielberg coincidentally become like the largest filmmakers in the country and the world,
Didn't Spielberg's wife or sister also work for the CIA?
I don't know. I didn't see
I
that.
think his sister is CIA, or it might have been FBI actually. But I think there are some connections there.
So I did just wanted to make sure to deliver a little bit on like we were talking about last time. I know we keep kind of wandering into music territory, but the thing that was really surprising to me in this book was how much Hollywood and celebrity, like actors and things like that are littered throughout a lot of these stories. And of course, like those Manson murders were more of like actor type people that were victims. I mean, Sharon Tate, for instance. So
but it's not surprising. I mean,
no,
if that's the like I think we talked about on the last one, the last episode, is that like when that is like the hot medium, if that is like the culturally relevant space where things are happening, it makes sense that if you're working in psychological manipulation and warfare or whatever you want to call it, yes, you would be operating in that space. And probably it's moved some now to internet, and it's probably still some Hollywood. I mean, I don't know. We've never sold our souls to the MK Ultra. Like that's probably never made it in music big, because we weren't like whacking dignitaries on the side while we're playing gigs.
Would have got a lot further.
Or if we'd at least like distributed acid or something for the CIA,
yeah,
that would have gone a long way.
Missed the boat on that one.
But we have our integrity, I just think that a lot of those people, I guess that was my point, is that I think were a lot of these artist spies, or a lot of them I think that, like I said, the managers, I think there's people behind this. I think a lot of them are useful idiots. I think they are artists. They are doing their thing. I'm not saying that they weren't real artists. I just think that maybe their careers were nudged along in a certain direction because it was convenient for the people that were pushing that.
Yeah, I agree. It's in this, certainly in that area or in that era, it looks like we saw who the powers that be wanted us to see.
Yeah.
Front and center. And I think you're right. You can't count on some young 20-something rock star whose mind is constantly fried on acid, alcohol, and pot to do what you want them to. Like, hey man, we need you to do this like really specific assassination.
Some of them you couldn't, but that's kind of, I think, his criticism of people like Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
is that he didn't do drugs.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
there's some of these guys that were more like cult leaders,
Yeah.
and it looks pretty bad that they would encourage a lot of their groupies and stuff to
Mhm.
be, but they would never participate. And it's
Yeah.
clearly because they probably, whether it was like, you know,
Yeah, I think
spy
Crosby was
stuff
that
or
way
just,
too. Yeah.
there was a lot of them that they didn't, they looked like cult leaders. They did not look, they were using
Yeah.
drugs and rock and roll and all that to manipulate everyone around them, but they didn't actually partake in it.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are still alive today. Cause
Yeah. God, yeah, the amount of deaths that come from that era is astounding.
there's a back in the, I think in the early 90s, they did like some sort of we did at our church locally, they did some sort of fundraising to rebuild like a parish center or something. And so part of what they did was sponsors would buy bricks that were engraved and put into the ground outside of the church, and you would dedicate them to like your grandparents or like your whatever, and just all these different
Yeah.
bricks. And one day somebody pointed out, I was like looking down, and in the 90s, somebody bought a brick and it just says on the brick, "Pray for Frank Zappa."
Oh.
I thought it was the funniest thing
That's
I've ever
great.
seen.
Yeah.
It's like all these different grandmas and
Yeah.
grandpas. It's like, "Pray for Frank Zappa." And then I thought like, well, yeah, probably should pray
Yeah,
for Frank
sure.
Zappa.
Yeah. Why not?
Not a nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah, this is believe it or not, the first week I took time to actually listen to Frank Zappa's music. I mean, it's not something you hear on the radio very much.
Mhm.
A lot of people are fans of Frank Zappa, but you have to actually seek it out. You know, it's not
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's not like Skinner where it's just on all the time.
I've thought he was funny in some of the film stuff he did. I think I've never really liked his music at all.
It man, you can tell it's a pretty active mind. He's yeah, cool cool arrangements, and
I'm gonna have to go listen
you
to some
can
more
tell
Frank
you can
Zappa.
tell why stoners like it, because there's like like the song I heard. I won't repeat it because this is a family podcast, but this is a really funny, dirty song that I listened to.
Well, so there you go. There's a guy making stoner music who
Oh,
himself
yeah.
is
Right.
actually not
Yeah.
a stoner.
Yeah,
So why are you making stoner music?
yeah,
You know, it's a little too on the nose. Anyway,
that's right.
thank you for listening. This has been a kind of a improv throw together podcast. Sorry if we wandered.
All right, I really tried to make an outline more than once between these last two episodes, and there's just so much.
The Lincoln assassination is going to be really hard because
Yeah.
I'm trying to right now, and it's more convoluted. I mean, because it's all like old names that we've never heard of.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have no idea who that person
Yeah.
is, but there's a history there. So anyway, thank you for listening to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. We'll see you guys next time.